What's up, everyone? I'm Jackie.
And I'm Lindsay.
And we are Women Leaders in Sports Medicine.
Here to help you grow your game and own your game. Today we have the amazing opportunity to speak with Rachel Balkovec, who is the current hitting coach for the New York Yankees, as well as changing lives in her spare time with her Virtual Handshake Academy. Rachel has been a driving force in the sports world, and if you don't believe us, Google her resume to see for yourself. Join us as we touch on the importance of digging deep to find your true purpose, reflecting on what someone may say at your funeral, gender bias in the field, and how to be okay with the fact that you may be the change, learning empathy, and never letting anyone tell you can't do something.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Women in Leaders Sports Medicine Podcast today. We have with us Rachel Balkovec, a hitting coach for the New York Yankees. So, Rachel, thank you so much for taking time today to join us. I know you've been talking to a lot of people lately, so we appreciate it.
No, this is great. And I mean, I love to be on with a couple of ladies, so that's always fun. I hate to say it, but it's a little bit rare. So, and the project you're doing is rare too. So really cool. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So just to kick this off, what has this time off been like for you?
I'm really good with time off or time alone. So it's been great. So, yeah, I mean, really I'm still kind of keeping in touch with players and doing what we can from afar. But, yeah, to be honest with you, I don't really struggle with downtime and I don't struggle with alone time. So I've been doing wonderfully, just getting outside a lot and enjoying nature and working on projects and businesses and reading and writing. And there's just never enough hours in the day. So I'm good.
That's great. I think that's one thing our generation may struggle with a little bit. But we could go into a completely different route with this podcast on that. So I'll make sure to stay on topic. But that's great that you're doing well and that you're doing everything you want to do. So how we like to start our podcast off usually when there is no COVID-19 going on or world pandemics. Can you tell us a little bit of your why of just getting into coaching? Because right now you're a hitting coach for the Yankees. You've been a strength coach in the past. So tell us your why.
I really just love human development and not development in making your swing better and making you hit the ball further, and not development and getting stronger and not the physical attributes, but just like the mental components of emotional maturity, of finding their purpose, understanding their calling in life, and understanding that what they're doing is really just a platform to accomplish what their calling or passion is. And so, I mean, if you look at other projects that I do, it's like, okay, I'm a hitting coach, right? And a coach is my profession. But I also have started a course for young professionals or just professionals in general called the Virtual Handshake Academy. I just started a company with an awesome woman named Female Executive Mentorships. And so pretty much like everything that I do, all of these things that I'm doing are really focused on human development in different areas, right? So for young professionals, specifically for women, and then in my actual, air quotes job of being a hitting coach for the New York Yankees, it's all really about watching people develop and using different platforms, using different vehicles for that development. Obviously, for me personally, baseball is one of those vehicles, but I just really love watching people go through those processes of who am I? Why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? Why am I putting myself through this struggle? Like, what is my purpose? And really, really focusing on having them cling tightly to their purpose in times of difficulty. And so that's really like why I got into coaching and, my passion behind it. I think the like more technical step-by-step process of why did I get into coaching as well. I played softball in college and I experienced great coaching myself and had excellent mentors. And it just really kind of led me down the path of wanting to do that myself. So that's kind of the, I guess, nitty gritty, like why did I do it? It's because my background, I was an athlete growing up and all those things, but realistically now I'm 32 and I just realized that my passion is just, again, human development and helping young people or just people in general kind of get to that next step of their life.
I think a lot of listeners out there, and I know Jackie and I personally can relate to that. And I think you touched on a huge point about how important it is to give back when you've been fortunate enough to have, it sounds like, great mentors and great individuals who've helped you find your purpose. I mean, I know that's why we're starting this network. We're like, oh, how can we give back in a large scale? So we're right there with you, which is great.
And I love your translation of your why beyond your craft, beyond strength and conditioning, beyond coaching. I think a lot of people like kind of keep their why to one thing, and it doesn't always let them expand to like all the other things that they have value in that they could support others with. And, you know, for you being able to do Virtual Handshake Academy and linking up with other really strong, powerful women, I think that's really great. Kind of touching on, you know, growth and development and your journey. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your background and going into, you know, where you are now?
Yeah. Very, very, very long story short. I basically grew up in Nebraska. I went to Creighton University my freshman year of college and played softball there. And then I transferred to University of New Mexico. So I ended up finishing up my playing career there. I did a master's degree at LSU. I was a graduate assistant strength and conditioning coach after a couple of internships, ended up going to LSU. Phenomenal experience. From there, I did a really short internship for the St. Louis Cardinals, pretty much right after my graduate assistantship. After that, I had a little tough time getting into professional baseball. So I was kind of floundering around for a year or so, which I can expand on if you'd like. And then I was in professional baseball I've been in professional baseball for the past 7 years. So I worked for the St. Louis Cardinals for 3 years and then Astros for 3 years. And I was just hired by the Yankees this year as a hitting coach. So I transferred over from strength and conditioning to being a hitting coach. Kind of skipped a lot, but I definitely skipped to an important step I went back to school last year in 2019 to get a second master's degree in biomechanics and statistics. So I was in Europe for that for a year before I came back to the States, did my research in Seattle, and was hired by the Yankees. That was super short, but I'm happy to expand on anything you want here.
I'm sure we totally will expand. There's so many really good kind of like talking points and transitions to go into there. What made you do the program in the Netherlands? What, you just wanted to travel and you liked the program, or was there something about that you know kind of caught your eye?
I always want to travel, so that's never.
Yeah, I feel you. Me too.
Yeah, that's never really an issue to just pick up and go, even if it's across the world. So that, like, when I was looking at my options, and this is something I always tell young professionals or just people, I mean, keep saying young professionals, but it's like, I tell this to 40-year-old people. It's like, if you're going to do something and you want to learn something, you should try to go for the best in the world, not just like what's down the street from you and the, you know, the local opportunities. And so I looked all over the world for programs, not just in the United States. I actually did apply and was accepted to USC's program in Los Angeles, but the Netherlands, for several reasons, I knew I wanted to transition out of strength and conditioning and into like more specific sport coaching. And it was going to allow me an opportunity to work for the Netherlands national team as a kind of an apprentice coach. I mean, I was full-time student for sure there. Right. But I was working every single day for a couple of hours for the Netherlands national team in the cages. So I was in the weight room a little bit, but pretty much most of my time was spent in the cages. So I was kind of able to kind of get my feet wet coaching swings and actually coaching on-field performance stuff as opposed to weight room. So that was a huge factor that I knew that I could have that opportunity there to kind of cross over from an experience standpoint. And then also the program specifically was it's human movement sciences, and it was geared towards research. So there's a lot of statistics, a lot of like computer science coding stuff, which I am still shockingly horrible at, but now I just have a better understanding of it. So I knew it was a very research focused program. So it was just 1 year of classes. You know, I was sitting at a desk, but also then there was a required research component. So I was able to do like hands-on research at a phenomenal facility in Seattle called Driveline Baseball, which is top in the world in baseball performance and research. So I was able to do that. So I just like multifactorial, but I basically was like, hands down the best situation for me personally at my stage in my career, what I wanted to do. So I went and I shouldn't get too much credit for traveling across the world to do that, because I love to travel. So I was like, oh no, the best program is in Europe. I guess I'll have to move to Europe.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I love traveling, and I think that is great that you were willing and open to do that. And it sounds like that program was really, a great bridge for you to incorporate continued progression and learning and what you want to do, but also starting to add in a little bit more of that coaching experience and shifting from strength and conditioning world to coaching world, and then eventually being able to be a part of research. Really, you've been kind of having your hands in all sort of areas as far as baseball goes. But I think that's so important. I think, our research is what drives what we see, what we do, what we treat, what we coach. So that's really cool. And thank you for expanding on that, because, looking at your history, I saw that you went there and I was very curious about it.
Yeah. Yeah. When, just a little side tangent, when Jackie and I were researching you and trying to think of the best questions for this podcast, both of us kind of made a comment like, she could be a physical therapist. Like, probably the way she looks at movement and everything. Like I wouldn't be surprised if she goes to PT school after this. Looking at everything you've done, we had to joke.
I've been heavily influenced by some physical therapists, honestly. And like I have such an eclectic background, but it's because of my early mentorship and kind of the way that I was like raised in the field was not to look at it just from one aspect. And so, I love to lift heavy and train extremely hard. And sometimes that doesn't look like perfect form all the time because it's high intensity training, but I also know what technique is supposed to look like, and I know how to coach it really well. And that's a 100% a result of my early mentorship and kind of being influenced by people who were extremely good at the biomechanics side of thing. And it gave me the eye, they would be looking at something and saying, and I'm like, how did you see that? And they're like, well, this is what I'm looking at. So they kind of give me a really like refined eye to look at movement. But also I was influenced by LSU, which like, they're really smart coaches, but it's much more about culture and high intensity and training and winning, and kind of less focus on like movement and function. And, so I just had some really excellent mentors early on, and a diverse, very, very broad spectrum of mentors that taught me both sides of the coin, Yeah.
And I think that's great. In terms of reiterating, not just going down one path or one thought process. Jackie takes more students than I do, but I know young clinicians coming out and young strength coaches I talk with, if they end up in my facility, they're very much set on like one thing. It's like they're a horse with blinders on, just because that's what they're comfortable with, versus looking at a wide spectrum. And like you said, it's a spectrum. You can get as nitty gritty about movement as you want, and you could go the opposite way and not correct form or technique, especially in the strength field. So I'm glad you touched on that, because I think it's important for listeners to keep an open mind. So that being said, to take maybe a little step back through your journey when you were in the weight room a little more, can you tell us maybe a couple lessons that you learned in the weight room, whether it be from mentors or just life lessons that you've been able to carry with you just into your role right now?
I think there's many, one of them we kind of already touched on. One of the first things I learned, one of my first internships, it was at Athletes Performance, which is now Exos, which is I was like, I think people know about that, especially in like the treatment.
If not, and you're listening, Google it.
Yeah. Google X. They're huge. Mark Verstegen is a visionary. He's a visionary. He's nothing short of a visionary. So phenomenal company, and just like really great first internship as a undergrad, just like so blessed. And the first thing they said was, don't be a guru. So you walk in and even back, this was 2009, I did that internship, and they were fully integrative. Like they had, the PT was there. We got athletic trainers, we got nutrition, we got strength coaches. And the one that I was actually, the facility that I was at the time, if this gives you an idea of how old I am, there were only 3 Athletes Performances or Exos. Now I don't know, hundreds across the world.
So many.
So they're everywhere. So it was still pretty small. And this was before like everyone was talking about integration, and strength coaches are taking PT courses and PTs are taking, this was like not that time. So Exos was really ahead of the times there. And they're like, don't be a guru, communicate. The PT tables were like in the weight room. You know, there was no walls up, there was no nothing. They were really serving the athlete from all sides and really having like a full support team around it. And the performance facility that I was at was actually attached to the Andrews Institute. It's in Gulf Breeze, Florida. So you look back as an intern, I'm just like, I was so fortunate. I got to like sit into Dr. Andrews, you know, conferences on the weekends. And of course us interns were like, oh God, like we have to sit into these long, you know, and I think back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had this amazing opportunity, which I took advantage of it. But like, you know, just looking back, I'm like, wow, that was a phenomenal first experience. And what it really taught me, and we've already talked about this a bit, but like my first introduction into strength and conditioning was this completely integrative, like facility of just everyone was working together. We all sat in the same office. There was no like, oh, you're injury prevention and your strength. It just was like full integration. So I think that's part of why I went into strength and conditioning, viewing it as just very well-rounded and we were all working together kind of thing. So that for sure is like something that I've taken from most of my mentors along the way. I think another thing that's really allowed me to cross over to sport training is like the body. This is something I've taken away from many of my mentors. And I know it seems like a big jump from the outside to go from strength and conditioning to being a hitting coach, but it's just the body, and the body acts the same, whether it's in the cages or the weight room or physical therapy. The body is the same body. It's just applying it to different movements. And so if you see someone who has poor hip hinge in the weight room, they're also going to have a poor hip hinge in their swing. So it's not, I mean, the body doesn't act differently just because it changes, you know, places. And so for me, it doesn't really feel like that big of a jump. And that's also not only from strength and conditioning mentors, but when I was with the Astros, the hitting coordinator there, his name was Jeff Albert. Now he's with the Cardinals, but he has a background in kinesiology. So he was mentoring me as a strength coach, teaching me about hitting. And again, just these integrative people that I've really taken to and that have, you know, I've been fortunate enough that they've been willing to teach me. Like his perspective is that strength coaches aren't really that different. And so when I was with the Astros, this kind of like idea just started to brew and kind of develop in my mind. Like, why can't I be a hitting coach? Because all these guys, Jeff Albert hired a lot of hitting coaches that had exercise science backgrounds and strength and conditioning backgrounds because he liked the way that they approached the swing from a anatomy and physiology standpoint and a more scientific standpoint. So, I mean, realistically, I've just had all of these, I would say like, my mentors, either because I've chosen, you know, that I've really gravitated to mentors like that, or because I've just been fortunate to run into them. I don't like to use the word lucky, but you know, you don't get lucky. You kind of self-select and then you make up a story about being lucky. But all of my mentors, I would say, have a pretty strong thread of generalism, like being generalists and not, oh, I'm a hitting coach and I don't talk to strength coaches, you know, or I'm a strength coach and I don't talk to the analysts or the front office people. Like I've just been really fortunate. The mentors that I've had have all been very much integrative and very much proponents of being a generalist and not just being really good at one thing. And in my opinion, very fragile because of it, because they only have one skill set.
Yeah, that's great. I think you touched on some really fun points there. One being, you know, at the end of the day, we in the sports medicine world, we train to perform, and some of the movements that we're rehabbing or in the weight room with, they start showing themselves on the field as well. So the eye that you train early on in your strength and conditioning or rehab or whatever type of, you know, athletic training career you might have, it's going to show up later. And so I think the idea of, you know, things being very mutually exclusive, I don't talk to you, you don't talk to me, is an old concept. And it's sad when I still hear that people are in, you know, these supposedly integrative communities and they're like, I don't talk to strength and conditioning. I'm like, well, why not? Like, your athlete's going to go with them. They're an integral part in them getting back on the field, or, you know, even going into some of the other fields as far as sports psych or nutrition and things like that. I think there's so much to learn from each other. And that's great that you've had that experience, that integrative experience from a very early on point. Kind of going into that a little bit, you know, now you're in a coaching realm and you've been in strength and conditioning as well. What are some kind of communication techniques that you found have been helpful for you to speak to kind of the whole, especially for those who've not had that experience before?
Well, I don't really have like an easy answer, but here's what I'll tell you. Yeah, I mean, it's like, this answer is going to be unpopular because it's going to takes time. But, you know, you have to like learn if you want, especially if you are like you know, for the listeners, air quotes, support staff. The hitting coach isn't going to come to you and go, hey guys, you know what? I was watching this seminar on strength and conditioning the other day and blah, blah, blah. Like, no. And the front office or the administrators or whoever your boss is not going to get out from behind their desk and go into the weight room and crank up loud music and start doing snatches. It's not going to happen. And if it does, you're in utopia and you should never leave there. But like, you know, But like, what you're going to have to do if you're a support staff member, you have got to go to them. You've got to learn hitting mechanics, pitching mechanics. You got to learn statistics, because if you're working in a team sports setting, that's everything, right? You know, statistics and computer science and coding and all of these things that I didn't learn in my undergrad degree, you know, so you have to learn basically how to speak their language really well, not just say, hey guys, I'm here for you if you need me. They're not going to come to you, especially as strength coaches. Like, I don't know who all listens to this, but especially as strength coaches, I was talking on a webinar the other day to a bunch of collegiate strength coaches, and like, think about this. Your person who signs your check sits behind the desk all day in a suit. They walk down to the weight room, and you've got loud rap music playing to the point where you've got to scream over them. You're wearing a sweatsuit with your hood up and like headbutting people. Do you think that the administrator is going to like learn your world and come and immerse themselves in it so that they can talk to you better? I doubt it. But, you know, we have the ability as strength coaches and physical therapists, we're professionals. We have the ability to, we're wearing sweats or we're wearing, you know, athletic clothing to work, but we can sure as hell transition, or I think morph easier to that leadership administrative situation. So my suggestion is, first of all, learn. You've got to learn about hitting mechanics or pitching, you know, and I'm saying because of baseball, but apply it to whatever world you live in. You've got to learn their language really well, not just say, hey, I'm here, my door's open, like, give me a break. That's old news. But also like, you need to go and be in their environment. And so I know, like, when I was with the Astros a ton, I would go and sit into the hitting meetings when I had a chance, or the pitching meetings, or administrative meetings. I would go up to the front office, change my clothes, wear what they're wearing, change into heels and a skirt and a blouse, and go sit in their meetings. And you know, this goes both ways. So thankfully, when I was there, they were like, oh, great. Hey, welcome. Come, you know, what do you think? Listen. So as soon as I sat in the room and put on a suit, you know, metaphorically speaking, and sat in the room, I was involved in the conversation. But if I hadn't made the effort myself, I would have never even spoken to some of those people. But instead, it opened up conversation because I was willing to go to them. And I think if you are a support staff member, if you're not the one writing the checks, sitting behind the desk in the corner office, they're not going to come down to you. You're going to have to make an effort to open up communication with them.
I think that's true across the board. Like you said, you can apply any of that information and advice you just gave our listeners anywhere. It's like, for example, I'm fortunate enough, I work in a facility where I have strength coaches there, and, you know, we have a sports psych on staff. But I know personally, when I first started there, if I hadn't made the extra effort to every day go in the gym, every day ask a different question and a meaningful question, the strength coaches wouldn't have ever referred me a patient, because they don't know what I know. Like you said, you need to go that extra mile, no matter who you are, no matter what your qualifications are, no matter what your experiences have been. At least what I heard you kind of say too, is you're taking your ego and you're putting it aside. And the only way you're going to open doors sometimes is if you're the one to initiate that communication. So I think that's great.
I think you said something important there too. It's like you genuinely want to go in there and learn. It's not like you went in there and said, "Hey guys, which Gatorade flavor is better?" You're not asking. and like there has to be a genuine curiosity. I'm genuinely curious about these things. I genuinely want to learn so I can be better at my job. It's not just me going and showing face in the hitting meetings to go, "Hey guys, I'm here to support," and then I sit in the back and I'm on my phone. I genuinely want to learn these things. So obviously there has to be that genuine curiosity, but it's also a great relationship builder.
Yeah, most definitely. So to transition a little bit, you've obviously had a lot of experiences. You've talked with a lot of different people. You've been in a lot of different situations. Throughout all of this, have you had maybe like 2 or 3, I guess we could call them obstacles, that you've kind of had to overcome on your journey? And I know if anyone's listened to any of your prior podcasts, they're probably, I know you kind of started smiling a little bit. They're probably laughing a little bit. Or if anyone's checked out your Virtual Handshake Academy website, which you all should, they might be laughing a little bit too. But to get back to the question, maybe if you could just touch on 2 or 3 obstacles you've had to overcome during all of this, and then how you overcame them.
Obstacles. I don't know. It's been pretty easy. Just kidding. Okay. So I mentioned this in my brief overview of my career, but I think this is a story that I've told a lot, but I'll tell it just for the sake of people who haven't heard. So basically I, graduated from LSU. Like I mentioned, I got a really short internship for 3-4 months with the St. Louis Cardinals over the summertime to do strength and conditioning. And even that was, huge, which again, looking back, I did not understand. I was pretty naive of how important that was. But at the end of the internship, basically they were like, "Hey, you did a great job, but this is an internship and we don't have a full-time spot for you. So good luck. And we'll contact you next season if we have something." I was like, okay. So I ended up, long story short, moving to the Dominican Republic for 3 months with a guy that I was dating at the time, which was also really good for my resume. I was able to work for a winter ball team down there. And then I moved to Phoenix to start a PhD in nutrition. So for those of you who don't know, in professional baseball, 15 teams are based in Phoenix. And so I thought to myself, when I moved to Phoenix, I was like, I'll just get another internship while I'm doing these prerequisites for my PhD. So I applied for 10-ish jobs, and got nothing back. And I was like, I was still very naive. So I was like, oh, well, I just got to work harder. That's, the solution to everything is just work harder, do more internships. So, and to recap for people, to that point, I had done 6 different internships, including a 2-year graduate assistantship at LSU. And I spoke some Spanish. I worked for the St. Louis Cardinals, Exos, Arizona State. I skipped over some of that stuff, but I had a really good resume for a young person. So I got nothing back. And then finally, middle of spring training, I had already got a job waitressing and just to pay the bills. And I was taking a prerequisite for my PhD that I thought I was going to do. And I got a call mid-spring training from a team, and they were like, "Hey, we had somebody quit. They were desperate." And they were like, "Are you still interested in this job? Are you still local?" And I was like, "Yeah." I interviewed, went through 2 interviews, and he was like, "Hey, you're our girl, and I'll give you a call in a couple of days. We'll just get the HR stuff taken care of." I'm like, "Cool." Never heard from him. And I'm like, that's weird. Still didn't have any idea what was going on. So finally I get a call from him 3 weeks later. And I'm like, this is really weird. I had followed up, did all this stuff, followed up, didn't hear from him. And he gets on the phone and he just was super sad. He was like, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but we're not going to be able to hire you. And I just want to let you know it's because of your gender." And I just was like, I was floored. First of all, because that's illegal. But second of all, I was shocked. I just did not understand. I was very naive to the fact that might be going on. I had no idea that was going on. So he was like, I just wanted to be honest with you. You know, he's like, my mom is a PhD. I totally respect women. I wanted to hire you, but it's really not my decision. He's like, I just really wanted to be honest with you. And I know this is like hard to say. And I mean, I was really grateful because he was honest. And then I kind of had an idea of what I was going up against finally. And he was like, well, it gets worse. And I just thought like, how could this possibly get worse? You just told me that you were discriminating against me. And he was like, well, it took me so long to get back to you because I called around to all the other people that I knew had open positions for the season. And they said that they had received your resume, but that they were also not in a position to hire a woman. And I was like, wow, you know, so all those people that I applied for, I just thought like, oh, there were so many applicants, they didn't get to my resume, or my resume wasn't good enough or whatever. But the truth is that I was just getting discriminated against. And then, you know, as the months and years went on, I like heard specific stories of organizations, which I should write in a book, but I like so many times, so I'd be like, oh yeah, I got your resume, but you know, it was just a tough time for women. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know?
What? Yeah. It's not an answer
like,
at all.
No. Yeah. Or I heard like, oh, my boss got your resume, but he just wished that your name wasn't Rachel. And I'm just like, cool.
Awesome.
Well, I sat out that season of baseball, and I like a story that's kind of gaining traction is the next off season coming around. I just waitress, and I picked up a unpaid internship at Arizona State to keep my resume fresh. Somewhere along that year, I decided I didn't want to go back to school for a PhD, that I wanted to keep coaching. And I just, the following season, the off season came around, and I was so desperate, and I wanted to make sure that I was at least getting a look or could at least get on the phone for an interview. So I changed my name on my resume to Ray, to look like a guy. And surprise, surprise, I got instant responses from a lot of teams. And I just, you know, it was pretty short-lived. It was a short-lived alter ego because I got a phone call. I was getting email responses, and I was like, yeah, I'm interested. Let's set up an interview. And we were kind of going through that as Ray under like the, you know, alter ego Ray. And I finally got a phone call, and I didn't know the number. I picked it up and I said, hello. And then they were like, oh, we're looking for Ray. And I was like, oh no. I was like, oh.
I'm caught.
Yeah. Code red. Yeah. I was like, this is she. And so it was a really, just long story short, a very awkward conversation, and ended up, you know, he was like, oh, I'll call you back. We're going to set up like a formal interview the next day. And I never heard from him. And so I just pretty quickly realized like, okay, look, if they don't want to hire me because of my gender, then I probably just don't want to work for them, which is a hard pill to swallow, because that meant that I was limiting my teams to only one that I knew of, which was the St. Louis Cardinals, that had already given me like an internship opportunity, which they ended up being the kind of savior in all of this, because towards the end of that off season, it was like January. I mean, which is, by the way, really late. Like all the jobs are filled by that time. So January, I get a phone call from the St. Louis Cardinals major league strength coach. And I'm thinking like, why is this guy calling me? And he was like, hey, our coordinator has moved on, and he recommended you as a replacement. Would you be interested in interviewing for the minor league strength and conditioning coordinator position? And I just was like, I had to literally, like, I pulled the phone away from my face, and I was like, is this somebody that's messing with me? I'm like, hello. And so I'm like, because I was so shocked, because I was having trouble again getting a like internship, like a low level, just internship managing one minor league team. And this guy wanted me to interview for overseeing 250 athletes and 10 male strength coaches and traveling all over the country to all of their minor league affiliates. So, I mean, clearly it's like, it was just, I did get hired for that job, and it was like, okay, all of the work that I was putting in was paying off kind of behind the scenes. Like I had I did have a phenomenal resume, and I should have earned a full-time position, but I just wasn't even getting looks because of my gender. So it was eye-opening. It was obviously a huge, I owe Pete Prinze, really the major league strength coach for the Cardinals. I owe him everything for being able to, you know, have an open mind and taking a chance on me. So that year was pretty tough, but relatively speaking, it was only a year. And I always think, you know, Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years. Like I just had to sit out 1 year of baseball, you know, but it definitely was something that taught me a lot, and was, you know, I mean, it's forged me of sorts, and has given me a pretty clear idea of what goes on in the world. And understanding of what it means to be discriminated against and how that feels, and losing your identity and waitressing when you should be coaching professionally. So, I look back and I'm glad it happened in a lot of ways, but it definitely was a tough situation.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of really good things in there. I think a lot of young professionals come out not even thinking about gender bias or some of these other like back end things, because they're excited and they know their worth and they know they've worked their butt off, and it shouldn't be any different. But I think in one way, like some people might have gotten really frustrated to everything that was going on that happened with you, to the point where maybe they just stuck with a different type of job and didn't keep on pushing, the limit to the next stage. And I think that's a huge lesson there is the lesson in persistence and understanding your worth and saying, you know what, like this crappy situation, it's blatantly happening to me, but still trying to seek out some opportunities every so often. And I think the other side is you don't always realize when your hard work is paying off, right? So you getting that opportunity at the end of the day to come back to a team you interned with, shows that in the past you worked your butt off and showed, I know what I'm doing and I know I'm going to treat all of these athletes well. And it comes back and pays off at the end of the day. So that's great.
I think you said a couple of things and the original question before I went on that long story was like, how did you get through it? And I mean, look, there's plenty of times where I can remember when I was waitressing, so during that year, I had 8 different Division I colleges reach out to me about strength and conditioning jobs. So I could have easily interviewed for many and really good opportunities at big schools. So I could have easily interviewed for those jobs, but I never even got to the interview process, because every time I would get a phone call, I would ask for a men's sport. And of all of those 8 universities, I couldn't even get I was like, I need men's soccer, men's golf. It doesn't need to be football. I need a men's sport on my resume, because if I don't, then I'm going to be pigeonholed to women's sports forever. So especially as a young person. So I was I would ask for a male sport, and they're like, yeah, that's not this position. And I'm like, then I'm not interested, I'm waitressing. And I had to say no to these full-time positions, or I didn't have to, but I chose to say no to entertaining these full-time positions because it just wasn't worth it. And I think at some point during that year, I realized okay, this is not just professional baseball. This is society. This is all of sports. And I remember thinking to myself, and now I'm glad I did, but I remember thinking very early, I understood that I was this is my job. I have to do this, because obviously there are probably plenty of women who have tried to do this before and have just quit. And if that's the case, then I know that I can handle it. I know that I can, get through this. And I know that I'm qualified enough. I had all of these I had a wonderful resume to get into professional baseball, as witnessed by the fact that I was hired as a minor league coordinator, with that resume. So I had this phenomenal resume. I was like, wow, if I can't do it, then who's going to come behind me and do this? And so it kind of was became a calling pretty early on. And I just realized I had, I'm I got to fucking do this. I got to stick it out. And so I just think that, how did I get through it? First of all, purpose, which I just don't think, I think a lot of people think, oh, my purpose is to help people. And that's not your purpose. I talk a ton about that in the Virtual Handshake Academy through developing your cover letter, telling your story, understanding not, oh, what's my why? My why is not to help people. Everyone wants to help people, but why do you feel called to help people in this exact way? And I think that's probably when I started to really understand my purpose was to, do this for other women and go through some of the hardships that I went through, because other women, by the way, went through hardships for my benefit before me. And so it's now my job to do that for other women. And so I think that was the beginning of me understanding my true purpose in life and calling. And it was difficult, but I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you ladies if I didn't go through that. And so I'm thankful for all of it. And I definitely don't regret any of it. And I think that the more you can, again, just going back to how did I get through it? If you have a purpose or calling that is directed at other people, then it's way harder to quit than if you're just like, oh, I just want this job. I want money. I want a car. I want a house. I want stability for myself. It's really easy, relatively speaking, to quit on yourself. But when you feel like you have to do it for the greater good of a community or a group of people, then it's much harder to quit on yourself. And that's why I always suggest just digging deep and being able to find your purpose and your story. And that's something, again, I talk a ton about on the Virtual Handshake Academy, but also just like, that is my, you asked me in the beginning of this interview, what's my passion? And it's for human development. It's for seeking a higher purpose, and that's what I love to do, probably because of my own experiences. Yeah.
Well, personally, thank you for sticking with it and everything you stuck with, because I know of a lot of women in the sports field now look up to you, just through discussions I've had with them. And yeah, it's amazing. And they have, or the similar mindset of, well, hey, Rachel stuck with this. And, she eventually got through, like, why can't I? So thank you for enduring all that for us, because it's definitely paid off.
I love to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah. But to transition just a little bit, Jackie and I thought this question would fit well with everything we've been talking about. How would you define success? There's a lot of people who define it based on, like their resume or how much money they make and yada, yada, yada. But if you were to look back at your career, maybe like 20 years from now, or even just your life 20 years from now is more appropriate, how would you define success?
I was thinking about, like, what will people say at my funeral? And I mean, if I were to, like, die right now, and that's a thought that most people don't go to, but I'm fully aware that, I mean, any moment, anything, and so I think that the fact that that's always on my mind drives a lot of my decisions in life. But, if I were to die today, I would hope that people would say that I have, like, an impact on the community, and whatever community that means, whether that's, the Yankees that I'm working for, or if that's much bigger, for women everywhere. So just being able to make an impact, and make the road, I won't say easier, because I don't wish an easy life on anyone, but I would say, like, more enjoyable, for people to have more opportunity coming behind me. That is success. And then also, like, this sounds kind of lame, but, like, living life to the fullest, and like the traveling that I've done, the different experiences that I've chosen to do, I think is important for me to say that I've lived a successful life. And I look at people that say, well, I can't do that because of this, or money, kids, time, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, man, I hope that those words never leave my mouth, where even if I have kids, and you say, well, I can't leave my job, or I can't move because of my kids. You want your kids to see a mom or a dad who is daring and courageous and living their life to the fullest and setting a good example for them, and not just taking the safe route always. And so I think that I would want people to say that I've made an impact on anyone, big or small. And that also that I've taken every opportunity in life to live courageously and really live a colorful, meaningful life.
Yeah, I think that's hard for a lot of people coming into their craft early to look so far ahead, that statement of looking at what people are saying at my funeral to, kind of dictate, are they living their life to their fullest? They grind, and they don't take those moments to find passion in other things in life and, find that work-life balance, and end up getting, kind of burnt out at the end of the day. So being able to say, I lived my life daringly, not only in my craft, but in just my interactions with people and being able to affect people on a different level. That being said, you've mentioned a little bit your Virtual Handshake Academy. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you're doing over there, just so people are aware?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're talking about that, because I don't promote it enough. I don't talk about it enough, but it's basically, I created a course. What's that?
I said, we got you.
Yeah, I just, I should do more with it. Basically, I was getting, and I still get so many questions about, so basically I get so many questions, and I've gotten in the past so many questions about how did I get into this, cover letter, like career wise. And so I basically created a course for professionals, and I should stop saying young professionals, because I've worked with people who are 40 who need to dig into what their purpose is. And we talk about cover letter, but it's not like, oh, I write my cover letter and it's paragraphs and it's words. It's like, you need to be able to clearly convey your purpose and your passion in paragraph form. And that is like so much more difficult than people think. And usually all the cover letters that I would get is like, I like to help people and I work really hard and I want to work for your company, but that's not really, everyone says that.
Yeah,
so how do you start out? Yeah. So the Virtual Handshake Academy is the virtual presentation of your passion and your purpose, which is really difficult to do. And so I guess I'm basically wanting to help people to better convey themselves to future employers, to not only to like land your dream job. That's kind of the tagline, is like, get the job, but also to make sure that you're clearly conveying who you are before you get somewhere. Because what if you kind of paint this vanilla picture and you have your resume that's bullet points and this is what I've done, but like, who are you? Because you want to work for a company that aligns with your values and hopefully with your purpose. So basically it's helping people to get confident about virtually presenting themselves to employers and hopefully to land their dream job.
That's amazing. I think that's not a skill that people think about, through the first half of their career. Even, you were saying you're working with people who are in their 40s trying to figure out, and also the idea of really self-analyzing who you are. I think, in a similar way, I take student interviews and resumes all the time. And the ones that stand out are the ones that have tried to take the time at least to give me more than I want to help people. Because you should want to help people. If you're going to PT school or strength and conditioning or whatever it is, you should want to help people. That's a given. But there's a lot of difficulty and power in being able to cleanly and concisely and very thoroughly present yourself virtually. And I think that's going to be an amazing source you're going to give people, and just, another way to influence our community, not only in what your journey was and being able to have experience yourself, but, being able to help some people coming into it now. That's great.
Yeah. The course is really, it's kind of tactically like how to make a bullet point. And there's definitely like a lot of takeaways like that, but I really hope that they come out of the course with just more confidence and even maybe learning something about themselves that they hadn't even thought about before. Because especially in the cover letter section, I break down like, this is not your purpose. Like, tell me your story in 3 sentences. Like, what happened? What struggle did you go through that made you want to go to PT school? A lot of times it's like, I had an injury, or, I had a PT that was awesome. So like, tell that story. When I read somebody's cover letter, I should be like fired up and be like, oh my gosh, this person is the one, so, and I don't think that happens very often. In fact, I know, because I've received so many resumes and cover letters at this point that I'm like, oh, okay, like this, you don't know this, but you just sent me the exact same cover letter that I've received from hundreds of other people. So let me help you. I think part of the problem though is that most young professionals, especially in those undergrad and graduate, don't even know that they need this help. So it's like a little tough to kind of get that through to them. But this is definitely something that you don't learn in college. Your professor does not teach you how to do this. So it's kind of, I view it as like another, I guess, college course essentially, but it's way cheaper and hopefully even gets you a job faster than what you might have even learned in the classroom. So anyway, I love talking to young professionals, and it just was something that I had heard so many of the same questions that I was like, I have to put all this information in one place so that I can just offer it to people. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's great. What you said, I think, is great. You're helping people tell their story. And at the end of the day, that resonates more with who's sitting across from you at the table, because you're dealing with people. You're not dealing with a robot who just reads your resume and it's like a checklist. Yeah. Oh, you have this, this, this. At the end of the day, they want to deal with another person on the other side who knows and embodies their story. So I think that's awesome. Last but not least, you've touched on a bunch of great advice throughout this whole podcast. If maybe you had to sum up into a couple sentences what you could tell listeners out there, or maybe what you would tell yourself 5-10 years ago? What were a couple of sentences you could tell them or your past self?
So two things I would say, like in general, anyone who's getting into any field, especially if you want to start a business or do something different or be a CEO or be at the top of your company, I would say practice selective hearing. So early on in my career, when I would tell people I wanted to be in professional baseball, they were like, how, why, that's not going to happen. You know, all these like negative kind of messages coming towards me. And it's sometimes I think back and I'm like, God, it's a miracle that I even am here because of all the people that told me that I couldn't do it, including like, I don't even remember even one person that really was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Go do that. There was always something to be said negative. And even my parents who were just worried about me, they were like, are you sure you want to, you know, like, are you sure? Especially when I was getting like discriminated against, they were like, are you sure you don't want to just take a college job? You know? So they were just worried about me. But I really at times could only listen to myself. And that meant losing some relationships, or at least just, you know, with my parents, keeping it to certain topics. And as soon as they were like, so how's your, you know, what does your bank account look like? I'm like, gotta go, guys. See you later. Like, you know, had to really manage the conversations that I was having and make sure that I was only listening to what I wanted to do and stay with that. So selective hearing, number one. Number two, specifically to women, I would say empathy is something that I really struggled with. I was really good at selective hearing, but I was not good at empathy when I was getting into the field from like men. And, you know, it's change, and I don't like change. You don't like change. Nobody likes change. So I think that to be understanding when something weird happens or uncomfortable or maybe even negative, like somebody says something really rude to you, just be like, okay, well, sorry, you know, like, I know you're dealing with change here, but I'm just going to give you some time. You know, like instead of getting upset about it and I can't believe this and I'm going to go to HR and I'm going to go to Twitter. And it's like, look, some situations call for that, but a lot of them maybe just give them a pass. You know, I say it like this, probably this may be a good one to end on, but you know, if a mom has 3 sons and lives at home with her husband and 3 sons, and she walks into the bathroom and the toilet seat's up, is it because they hate her? Is it because they don't want her in the house? Is it because they're discriminating against her? No, it's because they forgot, you know, like they're not thinking. And sometimes that causes them to communicate weird or be intimidated or whatever. And I think like, it took me a really long time to be like, okay, you know, I got to wait for you to feel comfortable with me. And I got to, you know, just allow you to adjust to this change. Unfortunately, the change is literally me. And so I have to like take that on sometimes, but it is what it is. And if you're going to get into a male dominated industry or just a high level position in any industry, really, it's going to be male dominated. And you have to be prepared to just like understand that people are going to take time to adjust to you sometimes. So selective hearing and empathy. That's what I would tell my younger self.
Those are 2 great, you know, kind of final pieces of advice. I think, you know, on the side of empathy, there's lots of wonderful change for women in sport right now. And I think it's going to boom from here, but you're right. It's still a change for someone and people respond to change differently. And it's hard when you're the one that's the source of the change. But I think, you know, really being able to assess the situation and say like, is this person being like specifically spiteful to me, or is he just like trying to figure it out? And I think that's a hard pill to swallow at the beginning. But I think the more you look at it as like, it's just change and people respond differently, and deciding, okay, is this important for me to freak out about right now? Or, you know, do I need to just like, let him have a minute and breathe and then we'll be fine. We'll be good. Well, thank you, Rachel, so much for joining us today. You know, we were super excited to chat with you. And good luck with Virtual Handshake Academy. Anyone listening should definitely go and check it out. I think it's a wonderful tool. And again, like Rachel said, not something that you really learn in undergrad or grad school. But yeah, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, and hopefully we're back into baseball season soon.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Women Leaders in Sports Medicine podcast. This podcast is for you to take a step closer to your dreams.
Visit www.womenleadersinsportsmedicine.com to join our roundtables, learn about our mentorship programs, and to let us know what you want to hear. Have a great day, and remember, it's your time to lead.